Chris, like every other child born in the US, was force-fed into the educational system at the ripe old age of 5 years old by going to Greene County Primary School. Not much is known about Chris's experience there except that in the poem Song of Christian, Chris calls it a nice school. After what Chris most likely considered the worst 4 years of his life, he finished 3rd grade school in Greene County and started 4th grade in Nathaniel Greene Elementary School. It should also be noted that during this time, Chris attended James Madison University, which Chris went to for speech therapy sessions. He carpooled there and shared classes with his then friend and later on troll, Joshua Martinez. Now, Nathaniel Greene Elementary School is an elementary school in Stannardsville, Virginia, a small town which basically consists of a highway intersection. Chris attended 4th grade classes at this school. To this day, he consistently misspells the school's name as Nathaniel Greene and the name of the town was located as Standardsville, which out of all of Chris's mistakes, this is probably one of the most acceptable ones. Bob soon pulled Chris out of the school after Chris was allegedly abused by the principal and members of the staff. They abused me by pinning me to the ground with holding my wrists and my ankles. Chris has also claimed that his time at Nathaniel Greene inspired and justified his hatred for homos, since the principal who allegedly assaulted him was supposedly gay. If this sounds a little odd to you, well, my boy, we're just getting started. Based on quote-unquote physical abuse from 5 faculty members, Chris's parents took the case to Greene County Court. After the school board threatened to take Chris out of mainstream schools, Bob and Chris moved to Chesterfield County. Chris's resident physician, Jeff Rayner, said this: there was conflict over where he would have his schooling. His school system, or the Department of Social Service, had attempted to place the patient in a special school. His parents were very adamant that he be in a mainstream high school. In order to maintain custody of the patient's father moved them to Richmond, Virginia. The autism papers confirmed that Chris's parents moved him out of Greene County to avoid the possibility of having Chris admitted to a special school. Still, a clear picture of what actually took place has never come together. In his accounts of and references to the incident, Chris unsurprisingly leaves out the most important details, such as what prompted the school staff to quote-unquote abuse him, and tends to spin the story in a way that favors him. Chris briefly mentions Nathaniel Greene in his Song of Christian, saying that his last time he can remember getting an F in school was there, or possibly Greene County Primary School. The earliest documented mention by Chris of the incident, which led to his departure from the school, was made in 2003 in Chris plus Sarah's life shares, which Chris blamed the incident on the faculty's lack of knowledge on how to deal with an autistic child. Chris alluded to the incident once more in Story of My Current Days, my torturing past with the jerks of the Greene County school system, but did not elaborate any further. His earliest detailed account of the incident appears in his major YouTube address to the world from 2007. Some of the teachers and principals of Nathaniel Greene Elementary School that I was attending in later years, about late 1980s, early 1990s, they abused me. They abused me by pinning me to the ground with holding my wrists and ankles, pinning me down to the ground, and audio taping my cries and shouts. But anyway, my mother and my father, they both fought the court system, the Greene County court system, which they were not very nice bunch of people, very not, hands down. But anyways, we eventually moved to Chesterfield County for a nice, better school system. One of the common questions Chris answered in the mailbag, November 2009, asked him to list the 10 worst things that had happened to his life. The elementary school incident came in at number 10. Being pinned down on the floor by a teacher, 2 teacher aides, the guidance counselor and the principal on the floor, and having my screams and cries recorded onto audio cassettes back in 4th grade. It was worse than the autism, but not as bad as leaving high school. Priorities, ladies and gentlemen. In early 2009, Chris began to reveal another facet to his story, claiming that the principal was a pedophile. He alluded to this element of the story in his captain's log video from the 21st of January 2009, where he hinted that he, obviously lying through his teeth in order to bore his audience, had uncovered repressed memories. Chris later went in a bit more detail in a mumble chat later on. Oh yes, Dr. Johnson of Nathaniel Greene Elementary, the principal, he was the homo. That pretty much set me against the homos and further kept me on the straight path. In an IRC IRC chat from around the same time, Chris had more to say about Principal Johnson, as well as his father's campaign against the school board that later ensued. Back in my Greene County days, a principal of Nathaniel Greene Elementary School, Dr. Johnson was a homo. And when I was sent to his office, he picked me up, set me on his lap, then I would always get off his lap, because I always hated that. I felt bad vibes back then. Fortunately, it has never gotten beyond that, and my father caught his intentions on that, and the court battle started. He likely exaggerates, but my father knew that there were a bunch of homos within that school board, and that was why they hated me and my family, in addition to those people not understanding autism. Anyway, from those past memories, that is why I have grown up to rarely associate with men, and why I despise the homos the worst. Chris recounted another version of the story in Alex Benson Leary phone call number 8, when Alex claimed that homosexuals had never done him any harm. I was abused by one. A homosexual principal at my elementary school slapped me on his lap, said some offensive things to me, and I felt uncomfortable, so I jumped off his lap and hid under his desk. When Alec pressed him to explain what these offensive things were, Chris couldn't recall any detail. Bear in mind that Chris considers anything offensive if it's something he doesn't want to hear, so the principal was most likely just telling Chris to study harder or behave better or something similar. Given the fragmented nature of Chris's accounts, it's not clear whether he believes that the principal's lap incident and the pinned down and taped incident were directly connected. Certainly, it's easy to imagine how they might be linked together. Chris goes to see the principal, he feels threatened, he becomes agitated, then more staff members have to be called in to deal with the problem. Another possibility is that he threw a hissy fit over getting an F on an assignment and the situation got out of hand. However, a more complete and reliable version of this story has yet to be discovered. Chris's beliefs that he was molested and that there were conspiracies to have him institutionalized is most likely inspired by Bob, who has delusions of things like unidentified possible homosexuals, Megan Schroeder and Michael Snyder all being in collusion to get Chris kicked out of the gameplays. Bob's attribution of that incident to an imaginary cabal instead of Chris's behavior also shows a similar pattern of accountability on behalf of the Chandlers. Obviously, there are several oddities and inconsistencies in Chris's stories. This may be a deliberate attempt to cover up the truth, or simply the result of Chris unconsciously exaggerating his garbled memories of the event. Chris has never clearly explained what triggered these incidents. According to all of his accounts, the school faculty either assaulted him without provocation or for lustful or sadistic reasons. Public schools are required to have faculty experience with special needs education, so it's doubtful that Chris was surrounded entirely by people who didn't understand his condition. As a rule, elementary school principals aren't supposed to let kids sit on their lap for the exact reason Chris was afraid of. It's inappropriate behavior. It's quite likely, however, that Johnson was just trying to comfort Chris and forgot the rule. On top of that, the odds that the openly gay man would be employed as an educator in the rural South in early 1990s are slim to none. Furthermore, this assumes that Chris's claims of abuse by his principal aren't entirely fabricated to begin with. For starters, his line about repressed memories is fishy, and the revelation becomes even more suspect in light of its timing. Chris first mentioned his recollection of the incident in a video recorded right after his 20th of January 2009 IRC chat, where Clyde Cash and Billy Mays accused him of being a closeted homosexual and mocked his irrationally aggressive homophobia. It's quite possible that Chris invented the story about being abused as an excuse to defend his homophobia and a means of further proving his straightness. Since he was abused by a gay man, goes by Chris's unique version of logic, that means he can't be one himself. And likewise, that incident of abuse justifies his irrational hatred of gay people in general. As for the more thoroughly documented incident where Chris supposedly had to be subdued and tape recorded, it's most likely that Chris's autistic behavior was too difficult for the school staff to control, and the district sought evidence to prove that Chris needed to be moved out of mainstream schools. Evidence like this could also be used as evidence of parental neglect or incompetence in choosing to avoid the obvious care of a child with mental disabilities. A critical gap in the story concerns exactly where Chris would have gone if he had been removed from the mainstream school system, as the Nathaniel Greene staff had proposed. As mentioned previously, the psychiatrist who conducted Chris's psychiatric survey in 2007 described it as a special school, but Chris generally refers to it using harsher terms like institution or mental institution, as in the father call and his email with Jackie, presumably because his parents have referred to it in such a manner. One clue appears in the Jackie communications, where Chris calls it the Winchester Mental Institution. education. Winchester is a small city in the Shenandoah Valley area of Northwest Virginia, and it's home to the Grafton School, a well-established school and group home that specializes in, among other things, the education and treatment of young people with autism. Some observers have speculated that this may have been where Chris would have been sent had his parents not insisted on not sending him to a special school. The reason why his parents were so adamant to keep him in a normal or mainstream educational environment aren't hard to guess. Not surprisingly, most of these objections are self-centered and are really about the parents' own feelings, not their child's needs. Like many parents whose children have special needs, they may have felt that Chris's need for special care would reflect poorly on them as parents. They may have assumed that Chris and/or his family would be stigmatized by being put on a special school. They may have assumed that Chris would be limited in future opportunities by being put in a special school. They may have feared that a great financial burden would be imposed upon them if Chris was moved to special school. They may have assumed that Chris's problem wasn't a big deal, while educators who spent most of the day with him saw the reality of his situation. And they, by Chris's own admission, thought that school was going to lock Chris up in a paddle cell or straitjacket for the rest of his life with no chance to make friends ever or possibly lobotomize him. Ironically enough, given Chris was temporarily sent to Western State Hospital in February 2022, the Chandlers' obsession with keeping Chris out of what they thought was a mental institution indirectly led him to one. How absolutely poetic, majestically done, Vince Gilligan. Well done. After pulling Chris out of Nathaniel Green, Bob Chandler unsuccessfully took legal action against the school district. His case was eventually dropped in 1994. In 1993, Chris's family moved him away to the Richmond suburbs in order to keep him in mainstream classrooms, a crucial step in the development of the Chris we know and love today. In subsequent years, Chris has taken the notion, which probably originated with his father, of an autism-hating homosexual conspiracy to drive him from the school system and inflated it into something even more unlikely. In a May 2010 YouTube video, he imagines that they were also responsible for forcing him to move away from his high school friends in Richmond and getting him kicked out of the game place. The decision to mainstream Chris at all costs is perhaps the most significant turning point in his development. Had he received an education more effectively tailored to his needs and learned more about his condition beyond how to use it as an excuse, he might have become a substantially more well-adjusted adult who may have even formed part of society. Unfortunately, we will never know that Chris. To this day, all residents of 14 Branchland Court considered it the wisest decision they have ever made. However, Chris later implied that the trolling was the worst abuse he's received in his life, beating the pin-me-down event in 4th grade and his arrest. On the 4th of September 2013, Chris posted a 1-star review on an unofficial Facebook page of the elementary school showing that he still hates the elementary school to this day. And it says, "The teachers, counselors and principals here back in the early 90s physically abused and attempted molestation upon me, mentally and emotionally scarring me for life because they did not understand or care for autistic people, high-functioning or otherwise." Following conflicts with the Greene County school system, Bob withdrew Chris from Nathaniel Green Elementary School and homeschooled him for his 5th grade year, from 1992 to 1993. Although Chris believes that he moved to Chesterfield County in September 1992, contemporary sources indicated that he did not move until September 1993, meaning that he was homeschooled would not have taken place at 14 Branchland Court in Ruckersville. Providence Middle School was, well, Chris's middle school. Chris has described his time there as happy. He's fond of Mrs. Sanford, one of his teachers from Providence, whom he sees as one of the most influential teachers he had. Chris credits her with helping him develop social skills and teaching him how to cope with various problems such as bullying. That being said, Chris would also later on moan about verbal bullying he endured at Providence and being dragged to the school's principal office. He even described those events as being on the same level as being abused by his babysitter. Once Chris finished 8th grade, it was time for his freshman year in Manchester High School. But I'm gonna need to cut this video right here due to how much stuff there is to unpack from his Manchester High School arc, and the one after that, the infamous Piedmont Virginity Community College season finale. Also, I made this video shorter than usual due to me having a ton of work this month and wanting to push out at least one video each month. The second part will come out as long as this video reaches, I don't know, 5k likes and maybe 250 subscribers out of this one video. And with that said, goodbye.